Hello and welcome to What Would Teenage Davros Do, brought to you by Skaro TV. Each week we take the trials and tribulations of teenage life and ask, what would our esteemed leader have done when he was a teenager? Sadly, we can't be in the studio due to the deadly virus the Thals have released into the atmosphere, so joining us from a car-led bunker, it's David.
Hi Elliot.
Hello, thank you for joining us for this week's edition of What Would Teenage Davros Do? Are you looking forward to getting stuck into a few more bizarre and entertaining scenarios around teenage life? And
Always.
having a little think about what on earth good old our glorious leader Davros would have done.
Praise be. I've got your first scenario here, Elliot, so I'm only going to accept your first answer. So, your teenage Davros scenario is, you've got into a rushed relationship with someone at college school. You've broken up with them, but then you're having to see your ex every single day. What would teenage Davros do?
Wow, okay, that's a big scenario. So I feel that as glorious as our glorious leader Davros is, he would probably be quite socially awkward in situations. So I imagine he would, as much as possible, be attempting to avoid seeing this person, just wanting to kind of, walk down the corridor, head down, not looking at them, just trying to generally avoid the situation and avoid the conflict, because our glorious leader, he's glorious, but he's not the most confident always.
No, very much not a social pariah. Well, there we go. That was what teenage Davros would do.
Okay, great. I've got our first scenario for you, David, as well, where
Hit
I'm
me.
asking, imagine if Davros got grounded by his parents. How would he respond to being stuck in his room for a week?
Oh, I think Davros would absolutely take full advantage of that situation, and he'd develop some kind of plot, or he'd use the time really wisely to develop some kind of travel machine maybe, or some kind of genetic mutation. And he wouldn't mind. He would marvel at that, just being left alone to devise his science.
Yeah, that sounds like a very feasible way that our glorious leader would have spent his time. Now give me another scenario, David.
I've got a one-word scenario for you, Elliot.
Okay.
Acne.
Oh, okay. Again, I do not wish to criticise our glorious esteemed leader, but I wouldn't say that Davros, in his later life, was the greatest looker. So I don't
Maybe
think that he would have been too concerned about acne. Maybe he would have used it as an opportunity to try and develop some sort of cure to the idea of acne, because we know he's a great scientist, and maybe he would have used this as a chance. The greatest indeed, the greatest of scientists. I'm sorry, forgive me for my blasphemy against Davros. But yes, he may well have done that, or maybe he just wasn't too worried about it, because I don't think that visual appearance is a big thing for our glorious leader.
It's not big enough for him. His greatness is so above the worries of acne. He didn't care.
Oh, of course. Okay, so my next scenario for you, David, is imagine the scenario that Davros himself gets asked by a pretty girl on a date at school. How do you think he'd respond? Where would he take her on a date?
Oh gosh. Well, I think the Wastelands must be one scenario that Davros would devise. He'd use the opportunity to explore new places, new creatures, and I think he would always be using that situation to his own advantage. If he did say yes at all. I mean, we've talked although he is great and he is fantastic, and of course he is always right, Davros is not the social pariah, and so that girl may not have been worthy of his greatness, quite frankly. But it would have been something along those lines, I'm quite sure.
Yes, that sounds very feasible. Give me an next scenario, David.
So your next scenario is, what would Davros do if, when playing some kind of ball game, he got hit by a ball in his face?
Wow. Well, we know that Davros, he can be a bit of a fiery character at times. As much as he can be quite reserved, he can also be quite a fiery character. So I think depending on depending on the scenario that sort of resulted in this happening, I may well feel that whoever threw this ball may get the wrath of Davros, or maybe he would have just used it as an opportunity to test out some of his creations on this individual who has struck him with this ball, because I think that Davros, very much in his earlier days, he was experimenting. He wanted to find the best ways of taking control of many things, and maybe use this as a great opportunity to just test out some equipment that he'd developed.
Of course, while older Davros may just jump straight to annihilation of the said offender, younger Davros, he needed to work up to that. He needed to take opportunity of everything that came to pass.
Yes, okay, so my next scenario for you, David, is We're going a little bit deeper here. The scenario where Davros sadly loses his great grandma. How would he react and respond to that traumatic and tragic situation?
Wow, this is an area we have not delved into before on What Would Davros Do. I think Davros would take that quite badly. For while he is a magnificent leader and he will always put our lives above anyone else's, I think his obsession, or quite rightly, his focus on Daleks comes from focus on himself and his family and the love that he has for us and his own genetics. So I think Davros would take that quite badly, but I don't think he would show any emotion to anyone. For that, of course, would be a weakness, as
Indeed
Davros
it would.
has taught us.
Absolutely, of course. Okay, so David, give me your final scenario for this week.
My final scenario for this week, Elliot, is what would Davros do if he were addicted to social media? So a big turbulent issue here on Skaro.
Wow, yes, of course. It's a hot topic in the news, in the Skaro news channels every day, about young people's addictions to social media and the struggles and the detrimental effects of social media on people's brains, their mental health, their just general well-being. And I think for Davros, he probably would be, rather than he may be addicted to social media, but I imagine he would be a troll. He would be somebody hell-bent on causing people problems and danger and getting them struggling mentally with all the abuse that he sends on social media, that's sort of a way to channel his anger and his frustration during his teenage years. So I think he would have used it in quite a dark way in many ways.
I think that's a perfect way. That's a perfect way to describe Davros. An inspiration to us all. The troll of the century.
Exactly. He certainly is that, our glorious leader. And so my final scenario for you, quite a different one, is imagining that Davros was having his first driving lesson. How would he deal with driving cars on Skaro?
I think he would annihilate any car coming towards him. Having done driving lessons recently in my much adulter life than Davros, I would understand the frustration Davros feels at other cars on the road and other cars in his way, or quite frankly, anything that could disrupt his learning experience. So Davros does as Davros should and annihilates anything in his way.
He certainly does. Our glorious leader is very much one for that. But that is all we have time for on this week's edition of What Would Teenage Davros Do? We'll be back again, same time, same place next week for some more fun scenarios to discuss about our glorious leader. Of course, all of this show is very much done in jest because we adore and worship and praise our glorious, esteemed leader, Davros. Thank you, David. Thank you, David.
Praise be the great creator.
Thank you for joining us. And yeah, we'll be back same time, same place again next week. So join us again. And of course, praise Davros.